Hi everyone. So this weekend's work on the Zen is on the coolant system. We will drain the old coolant, use a coolant flush. Now this one that I have here, it is from Manol. There are flushes available from Liquimoli, etc. After draining the coolant, we will use the flush with distilled water. Now I have got a few 5 liter bottles of distilled water from Exide. We'll be using this. Additionally, along with flushing, we will also change the relevant rubber hoses. They are at least 24 years old now, and rubber would have degraded. The rubber hoses, the thermostat valve inside, the valve housing. There's a thermostat switch right here. There you go. And we shall change all these parts and we will get them in order. So the first order of business is to get the stock coolant out of the system. The vehicle has been switched off from yesterday night. So the coolant is at room temperature right now. It is best to drain the stock coolant at ambient temperature in view of the safety and should not be attempted right after a drive when the engine is at operating temperatures. At operating temperatures, the coolant is at approximately 85 to 90 degrees centigrade. So please be careful about this aspect. So let's get on with draining the coolant. So this is the radiator of the coolant system. There's a petcock at the bottom of the radiator. And if you open the petcock, you can drain the coolant from the system. To improve the flow of the coolant while draining, open the inlet cap of the radiator and it will help improve the flow while draining. So the car has been jacked up right now. Let me show you the location of the petcock. We have to crawl to the bottom. This right here, this is the petcock. If you turn it anti-clockwise like any other screw, the coolant will begin to drain. So keep a tray beneath for catching the coolant and do not let it drain to the ground. It's been a while now and the coolant has been drained to a good extent. What we'll do now is replace this petcock back into the radiator. Fill the radiator with the coolant flush and the distilled water. Okay, so with the drain cock replaced back, let's fill the radiator with the coolant flush. This is the first time I'm going to be using this particular flush concentrate from Manor. So I'm really not sure how well it works, but let's give it a shot. But I know for a fact that the coolant system has not been flushed in its lifetime in the last 24 years. So let's do this. The flush is like a transparent liquid, like water. Guys, please take note of an important aspect here. You must not use tap water or RO water in the coolant system. That's because tap water or RO water contains a lot of minerals which will solidify at higher temperatures and will get deposited on the walls of the rubber tubing, thereby reducing the performance of the coolant system. The car's user manual states that for manual transmission Zen, it uses approximately 4 liters of the coolant. So you can notice that the water has been topped up till the cap of the radiator. Now, after you start the engine and the coolant starts circulating through the engine block after the thermostat opens up, the level will further go down. Now let's start the engine. So the Manol coolant flush bottle specifies that the engine must be idle for at least 25 to 30 minutes. So the coolant reaches its operating temperature, which is slightly below the mid mark, which is 90 degrees centigrade. The flush will then circulate properly through the radiator, engine block and the heater core located inside the cabin. You can notice that the temperature gauge needle slowly climbing up. So after about 15 to 20 minutes, the coolant has reached its operating temperature. Once it has reached this level, turn on the heater from the HVAC controls. You slide the lever to the right and set the blower speed to the maximum. And you can sense the hot air being blown through the AC vents. This way, the coolant flush would circulate through the heater core. So we have circulated the flush for about 20 to 30 minutes and the engine had reached the operating temperature. Now we need to let it cool down for a bit as this entire area is super hot. You can see that I'm at the apartment basement at the moment and it is okay to leave it as it is here. Take a look at the innards of the coolant bottle. You can see all the dirty sediments at the bottom. Now we will be changing the bottle as well along with the hoses. We will also top up the reservoir with distilled water. So in case the coolant level goes down, it creates vacuum and takes in water or the coolant solution from the reservoir back to the system. Now the system has cooled down and is just warm to touch. We will drain the solution which contains the coolant flush from the system, just like how we drained the stock coolant before. and repeat the entire process. Fill distilled water, idle the engine till it reaches operating temperature, cool it down and drain the system. This is the first flush. I am also collecting some samples from the flush to show you the progressive change in the color of the coolant as we keep flushing in trademark Crisfix style. Now look at the sediments collected at the bottom of the drain pan which were flushed out from the system. Now I am pouring all the old flushes in these bottles as and when they get consumed. Now we will repeat the procedure for 2 more flushes. Three flushes done. The next order of business is to replace this hose which is connected at the top, then the bottom hose right here. Then we have the thermostat which is right here. That's the thermostat housing, and you have the thermostat inside. Here we have the thermostat switch, etc. Now plus all the clamps and screws in the system. I think it's a good idea to spray some WD-40 on the screws so they can unscrew without any trouble. We will wait for the WD-40 to settle down. We need to disconnect the radiator fan's power connector. It is very easy to do it. All you need to do is to pull up the tab and pull the connector out just like that. The radiator assembly is secured using 2 clamps at the top right here. So we need to remove them to pull out the assembly. You can see that these bushes are completely gone. We've got 2 similar bushes at the bottom as well. I've got new bushes for replacement, so not a problem. Now this is a spring-loaded clamp and there is a special set of pliers to get these off. Else a pair of normal lineman pliers would work as well. We will now remove the top support clamps from the radiator. It uses a 10 mm socket, M6 bolts basically. So this is a pair of hose clamp pliers used to undo spring-loaded clamps. If you don't have it, like I said, even a set of lineman pliers would do. This coolant reservoir is held in place at its side right here. If you pull it off, it just comes off. Just like that. You can see the clamp here on the body to which the reservoir is secured. So you can see that the radiator assembly is now loose. Let's undo the clamps at the top. And that hose comes off like that. You can see a lot of messy old coolant coming out of the hose. Now using a 10 mm socket, we will remove the clamp holding the other hose. Once the hose is done, just pull it out. We have removed all the cables that connect to the distributor from the spark plugs. Before you do that, I suggest you take some pictures and note down all the cable numbers. I have marked the numbers on the distributor cap here. The cap is secured using 2 screws, one at the top and the other at the bottom. Let's remove them. Be careful not to lose the screws as you unscrew them. We have removed the distributor cap. Now gently slide the radiator assembly out and ensure that in that process it does not touch the rotor of the distributor, which is now exposed. Finally, the radiator assembly is out. What you see here are the fins which are completely clogged. We will give it a proper wash. You can also see that the old bushes from the radiator support are completely gone and have become like powdery, disintegrated. We will clean this area before we seat the radiator back after cleaning. Next, we will remove the thermostat valve housing. It uses a 12 mm socket. There are 2 holding down bolts. Keep the carburetor hose clamp safely. So this is the housing, and this is the thermostat valve that you see here. We will pull it out using a pair of pliers since it seems to be stuck. It's not defective, but we will use a new one anyway since we are overhauling the complete system and a new thermostat barely costs anything. Now we have to renew the thermostat switch also. It's easy to remove this 2-pin connector, undo the tap and pull out the connector. To remove the thermostat switch, you will need a 24 mm socket. This is a threaded thermostat switch. It works, but like I said, since we are overhauling the whole system, we'll put in a new replacement. So we've brought the radiator assembly home. We will remove the fan from the assembly first. It is held to the frame using 3 M6 screws, one here, another one here, and another one there. It uses a 10 mm socket. See how badly these bolts are rusted, and we remove the fan assembly that way. We will now remove these hoses attached to the radiator. Please take care of one aspect. These fins of the radiator that you see here, these fins are very fine metallic sheets which aid in the heat transfer or cooling, and you must not deform or damage these fins. Usually, due to the draft of the air that comes from the front when the vehicle is moving, it aids in cooling. The fan kicks in on and off depending on the temperature of the coolant. This is very similar to the fins of the condenser that you see on the air conditioners of your home. Next, we will thoroughly clean the radiator using a cleaning solution. So, location change to the bathroom. So we have the radiator here, and this is the diluted alkaline cleaning solution. It is not acidic. In fact, it is the opposite of acid. It's a base, and if I'm not wrong, this is sodium hydroxide. And I have diluted it in a 1:1 ratio. That is 1/2 of the bottle in the concentrate and the other half consisting of tap water. We will rinse the fins with water first. The concentrate manufacturer has also specifically mentioned the use of protective gloves while working. I have this pair of 3M's reusable rubber based gloves which we'll use. Additionally, once we have sprayed the solution, we will use a brush to agitate the dirt lodged in the fins. Similarly, on the other side as well, we'll keep it standing along the wall. Notice how the dirt is coming out of the fins gradually. Oh man, just look at the sheer amount of dirt coming out. So day 2 today, and yesterday we had cleaned the radiator properly and left it overnight for drying. I did whatever best I could. Here, have a look. This is the other side. This is the alkaline concentrate I had used for cleaning. A bottle costs rupees 240. The instruction here says dilute with 2 to 4 parts of water in any type of pressurized spray. I used it in a 1:1 ratio, and it is super effective at removing all the dirt lodged in the fins. Please note that you cannot clean the cooling coil with this. You will have to use a different solution. So the radiator is done, and I've also cleaned the fan assembly as well. Here you go. So what I did was I used a moist cloth to clean the blade assembly and the frame as well. It really doesn't matter because one drive through the monsoons and it will be back to its former dirty self. The fan unit and the motor is from Denso, India. But please be careful while cleaning the blade assembly, as it's a balanced unit, and similar to how we do wheel balancing for our tires, the blades of a fan are also balanced to avoid unwanted whirling, vibrations and noise. So we will install the fan assembly back to the radiator. So we have installed the fan assembly to the radiator unit and have used three new M6 screws. One's here, another one here, and the other one there. We will also use a new petcock, and the stock drain cock still works, has an O-ring which hasn't broken or disintegrated, but we will renew it anyway. We will also install new bushes at the bottom of the radiator. The older bushes had got compressed and stuck to the radiator, and we have cleaned it properly. The work here being done, let's head back to the basement. Clean the surface of the thermostat housing here before installing the new gasket. And don't forget to remove the old O-ring from the thermostat switch housing. We have placed the new gasket on the housing, and let's install the new thermostat. So this is a new thermostat. And this is a new thermostat switch from Minda with the O-ring on the threaded end. Use a 24 mm socket to tighten it. Again, do not over tighten it. Plug the 2-pin connector to the thermostat switch. We have these new replacement M8 bolts for the thermostat housing. It uses a 12 mm socket. Careful while lowering the radiator assembly so as to not hit the rotor inside the distributor. We have to install the new bushes for the radiator. You just have to slot these bushes in the hole on the frame of the car. There you go, the two new bushes. Next up, the petcock. This is the new petcock with the O-ring. Again, do not over tighten it. You just have to hand tighten it, so it's easy to undo it later if required. So we have connected the new coolant hose at the bottom of the radiator. Ensure that the clamp, the two ends of the spring clamp, are facing the bottom, so it's easy to loosen it from the bottom of the car. Lower the radiator assembly gently. We are using two new M6 screws for the top two clamps. Connect the 2-pin connector of the fan assembly. That is done. Now let us install the cap of the distributor assembly. Now the connections of the distributor to the spark plugs and the ignition coil. It will be based on the numbering we had previously marked, else it will mess up with the firing order, so please be careful. I have also installed an extra clamp here for an added security. This one's the old one, and the spring-loaded clamp that you see here is the new one. Similarly, I have put a new spring-loaded clamp here as well. This is the support clamp for the cable that goes from the ignition coil to the distributor. We have to connect the hose from the overflow of the radiator. Now this is the new reservoir tank. The tank has a cap which has a hose that goes all the way to the bottom of the tank to draw the coolant in the event of vacuum. Similarly, the overflow is again pushed back to the tank. The cap has a gasket and the small tube pre-installed. Next, we need to fill coolant into the system. We'll do a trial run after filling the coolant. Now first up, let's fill distilled water into the reservoir. Connect the negative terminal to the battery. Notice this clamp from the radiator assembly at the bottom. We will clamp the lower hose that comes out of the radiator inside that clamp. So this is the Maruti OEM green coolant concentrate. A bottle of 1 liter costs rupees 280. It is sourced from the nearby MGP outlet. While the coolant circulates through the engine block, the coolant level dips as the system draws coolant from the reservoir. We will top it up later. Replace the radiator cap back and let's fire her up and let the engine reach the operating temperature so we can check for any potential leaks. It is only when the engine reaches its operating temperature and the thermostat opens up, the coolant begins flowing through this hose. So good news guys, there are no leaks so far. The engine has reached the operating temperature and as you can see, the fan has begun spinning as well. I was a bit worried about this joint right here. In fact, I'm still a bit concerned about leaks. Anyway, let's see how well it holds up. So let's summarize this DIY. I'll tell you all the works that we have undertaken. One, we have changed the top and bottom hoses of the radiator. Two, we have changed these spring-loaded clamps that you see here. We have retained one stock clamp for the lower hose that connects to the engine block since the manifold length was a bit higher. We have changed the thermostat valve, the thermostat housing, the gasket, all the fasteners, and the thermostat switch here. We have changed the reservoir tank along with the overflow hose with new spring clamps. We have flushed the entire system thrice and we have added new coolant concentrate, which you see here, diluted with distilled water in a 1:3 ratio. We have cleaned the radiator assembly thoroughly using an alkaline solution and we have replaced the radiator mount bushing, two at the top right here and two at the bottom. New fasteners wherever possible. And that effectively brings this laborious and lengthy DIY to a closure. But before I close, I wanted to give you a piece of advice. Never flush the stock old coolant solution through the drains, sewer or the toilets flush, guys. Just hand them over to workshops and they'll gladly take them from you as they have tie-ups with oil and water recycling centers. If you pour them into drains, it'll effectively contaminate the ecosystem and kill all the good bacteria. Okay, now in trademark Chris Fix style, check out the difference in the coolant flushed from the system after every flush. This was the stock coolant drained and this one after the first flush. This after the second flush and finally this one after the third flush. Okay, now let's look at all the parts used in this DIY. This is the coolant reservoir. These are the upper and the lower radiator hoses. These are the spring clamps. You are going to need two of each. This is the radiator petcock. This is the radiator mount bushing, 4 numbers each. These are the M6 bolts. This is the overflow hose from the radiator to the tank. This is a thermostat housing. This is the housing bolt. This is the thermostat gasket. This is the thermostat. This is the thermostat switch. This is the coolant concentrate. This is the distilled water 5 liter bottle. And this is the coolant flush. This is a parts diagram that shows the various parts used. Here is another one that shows the various hoses and the thermostat assembly. Thank you so much, guys.